A bride stands before her wedding guests, glass in hand, radiating a joyful glow. Her white gown is perfect. Her smile is dazzling, and her hand rests lovingly on her pregnant belly. Her new husband, a handsome billionaire, looks on with adoration. Everyone raises their glass for a toast to the happy couple. But the words that come out of her mouth are not words of love. They are words of calculated revenge, designed to shatter the perfect illusion she just created. This isn't a story about a fairy tale wedding. It's about the devastating speech that exposed a breathtaking betrayal and one woman's incredible fight for her future. The air in the Sterling's Hamptons estate was thick with the scent of white roses and old money. For Amelia Davenport, it was the scent of her future, a future that seemed as meticulously planned and flawlessly executed as the wedding rehearsal taking place on the sprawling oceanfront lawn. Everything was perfect, almost too perfect. Her fiancé Liam Sterling was the epitome of perfection. Heir to the Sterling real estate empire, he possessed the kind of easy charm and chiseled good looks that made boardrooms and bedrooms surrender with equal swiftness. They had met at Columbia University, he the charismatic business major, already managing a piece of his father's portfolio, and she the fiercely intelligent architecture student with dreams of reshaping the New York skyline. Theirs was a storybook romance, a whirlwind of rooftop dinners, spontaneous trips to Florence, and quiet Sunday mornings in their Park Avenue penthouse that felt more real than any of the glitter. When Liam had proposed 6 months ago, he'd rented out the entire top floor of the Rockefeller Center, filling the observatory with 1,000 candles. Kneeling before her with the New York City lights twinkling below, he had presented her with a diamond that seemed to hold all the stars in its facets. Amelia, a woman who built her life on solid foundations and logical plans, found herself swept away by the sheer unapologetic romance of it all. 2 months later, the discovery of her pregnancy had cemented their perfect picture. Liam was ecstatic. The Sterling family, particularly Liam's formidable father, Richard Sterling, had shifted from polite approval to enthusiastic embrace. Amelia wasn't just a suitable wife anymore. She was the vessel for the next Sterling heir, the continuation of a dynasty. Richard, a man whose smile never quite reached his cold, calculating eyes, began calling her "my dear," a term of endearment that felt more like a brand of ownership. Now, with the wedding just 2 days away, Amelia stood beside her best friend and maid of honor, Chloe Parker, watching the sunset paint the Atlantic in shades of pink and gold. "Can you believe it?" Amelia whispered, her hand resting on the gentle swell of her stomach. "Everything is exactly how we dreamed it would be." Chloe squeezed her arm, her bright, reassuring smile a constant fixture in Amelia's life. "You deserve all of it, Ames. Every last bit of happiness." Chloe had been her anchor since their first day of kindergarten, the sister she never had. She knew all of Amelia's secrets, had witnessed all her heartbreaks, and had been her most vocal cheerleader in her relationship with Liam. Chloe had helped plan every detail of the wedding, from tasting cakes to choosing the blush-colored dresses for the bridesmaids. Her loyalty was one of the bedrock certainties of Amelia's life. The rehearsal went off without a hitch. The choreographed walk down the aisle, the exchange of mock vows, the polite laughter at the officiant's jokes. It was a flawless performance. Later, as guests mingled on the stone terrace, sipping vintage champagne, Amelia felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. This was it. This was her forever. She watched Liam across the lawn, schmoozing with some of his father's business associates. He caught her eye and gave her a private, heart-melting smile. It was a smile that said you and me against the world. It was the smile that had made her fall in love with him. But as the evening wore on, a tiny discordant note was struck. Amelia was heading back inside to retrieve her shawl when she saw Liam step away from the crowd, his back to her, his cell phone pressed to his ear. His posture was tense, his shoulders hunched in a way that was jarringly out of place with the relaxed joy of the evening. She couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but she heard his low, urgent whisper. "Just be patient," he hissed into the phone. "Everything is going according to plan." A pause. "No, don't worry, I'll handle it. She won't suspect a thing. I promise." He ended the call and turned his face momentarily clouded with an emotion Amelia couldn't decipher before it was wiped clean, replaced by his usual charming smile when he saw her. "Hey, you," he said, striding over and wrapping his arms around her waist. "Getting cold?" "Who was that?" Amelia asked, trying to keep her tone light casual. Liam didn't miss a beat. "That was the jeweler," he said smoothly, kissing her forehead. "About your wedding gift. They were having an issue with the engraving, but I sorted it out. I swear you try to plan one little surprise." He rolled his eyes playfully, the perfect picture of a doting fiancé, frustrated by minor logistics. Relief washed over Amelia so potent it made her feel foolish. Of course. A surprise gift. It made perfect sense. She was being paranoid, letting the stress of the wedding get to her. She leaned into his embrace, inhaling the familiar, expensive scent of his cologne. "You spoil me," she murmured. "You deserve to be spoiled," he replied, his voice a low, convincing purr in her ear. "You and our baby." She believed him. She wanted to believe him more than anything in the world. But as he led her back toward the glittering party, the echo of his words on the phone. "She won't suspect a thing," played on a quiet loop in the back of her mind. It was a tiny crack in the flawless facade of her perfect life, too small to see clearly, but just big enough to let the cold in. The faint unease from Liam's phone call lingered with Amelia. Into the next day, a persistent hum beneath the symphony of final wedding preparations. She tried to dismiss it as bridal jitters, the natural anxiety that comes with such a life-altering event. But her mind, trained to see patterns and structural weaknesses, couldn't let go of the inconsistency. Liam was a masterful planner. The idea of a last-minute hiccup with a gift seemed uncharacteristically clumsy for him. That afternoon, she was in Liam's mahogany-paneled study at the estate, looking for a copy of their wedding insurance policy that her mother had insisted on seeing. As she sorted through a stack of files on his sprawling desk, a crisp envelope from their private bank caught her eye. It was their latest joint credit card statement. Normally, she wouldn't have given it a second thought. But a nagging curiosity fueled by that strange phone call prompted her to slide the papers out. She scanned the columns of figures charges for caterers, florists, deposits for their honeymoon in the Maldives. It was all familiar, all expected. Until her eyes landed on a charge from 2 weeks prior. A single transaction for $28,000 at a boutique she'd never heard of, Leclerc Fine Jewels, Madison Avenue. The item description was brief but specific. The Serafina pendant, custom. Amelia's brow furrowed. $28,000. It wasn't the engagement ring, and it wasn't their wedding bands which had come from Tiffany's. This was something else entirely. A stunningly expensive secret purchase. Could this be the surprise wedding gift he was talking about? It seemed plausible, but the sheer cost felt excessive even for Liam. And why hadn't he just said it was a necklace? Why the vague story about an engraving issue? She decided to test the waters. That evening, as they sat with Chloe on the veranda, finalizing the reception seating chart, Amelia brought it up, her voice a carefully crafted mix of casualness and affection. "Oh, darling, I was looking over our finances earlier." She began tracing a family name on the chart with her finger. "I saw the charge from that lovely little place, Leclerc. I hope you didn't get me another surprise. You've already spoiled me so much with this wedding." She watched his face for a reaction. For a split second, a flicker of panic crossed his eyes, before his smooth mask slid back into place. Chloe looked up from her list, her expression one of innocent curiosity. "Leclerc?" Liam chuckled, a sound that was a little too forced. He reached over and took Amelia's hand. "You weren't supposed to see that. It was a gift for my mother, actually. A thank you for all her help with everything. You know how particular she is about her jewelry. It had to be perfect." The lie was good. It was brilliant, in fact. His mother, Catherine Sterling, was notoriously difficult to please and had an insatiable appetite for expensive trinkets. It made perfect sense that Liam would buy her an extravagant piece to keep her happy in the run-up to the wedding. Amelia felt a hot flush of embarrassment. She was becoming the suspicious, paranoid fiancée she never wanted to be. "Oh," she said, her voice small. "Of course. That's so thoughtful of you, Liam." "Anything for the two most important women in my life," he said, squeezing her hand and winking at Chloe, who smiled back warmly. "Now where are we putting your crazy Uncle Robert?" The conversation moved on, the tension dissipating into the warm evening air. But the seed of doubt didn't just remain. It began to germinate in the dark, fertile soil of her intuition. Later that night, the lie began to unravel completely. Liam was taking a long shower, the sound of water drumming against the marble walls of their ensuite bathroom. His phone, which was usually glued to his hand, was charging on the nightstand beside their bed. Amelia was reading a book, or pretending to, when the screen lit up. It was a text message from an unknown number. The screen was locked, so she couldn't open it, but the preview banner lingered at the top for a few agonizing seconds, long enough for her to read the words that would detonate her world. Unknown number. Can't stop thinking about last night. The pendant looks divine on you. Amelia's blood ran cold. The book fell from her hands onto the plush carpet. Last night. Last night was the rehearsal dinner. They were surrounded by friends and family. There was no secret meeting, no moment he could have slipped away to give his mother a necklace. The pendant. The Serafina pendant. The one he supposedly bought for his mother. But the text wasn't from his mother. The heart emoji, the intimate tone, it was from a lover. Her mind reeled frantically, connecting the dots. The hushed phone call. She won't suspect a thing. The lie about the jeweler. The plausible but false story about his mother. And now this irrefutable, sickening proof. He wasn't just planning a surprise. He was living a double life. Liam was having an affair. She stared at the phone's dark, reflective screen, seeing her own wide, terrified eyes staring back. The hum of anxiety had become a roaring siren in her ears. The tiny crack in her perfect world had just fractured spiderwebbing across the entire foundation of her life, and she knew with a dreadful certainty that nothing would ever be the same. The only question left was who was the woman wearing her husband's secrets around her neck. The hours that followed felt like a fever dream. Amelia lay beside Liam in their opulent four-poster bed, feigning sleep, her body rigid with a silent scream. Every time he shifted or sighed in his sleep, a fresh wave of revulsion washed over her. His calm, steady breathing was a grotesque counterpoint to the hurricane raging inside her chest. Who was she? Who was the woman who had received the necklace meant to symbolize love, while Amelia received only lies? Her mind raced through a gallery of faces: business associates, society, acquaintances, old college friends. The possibilities were endless and agonizing. She needed more than a text message. She needed a name. She needed to see the face of her betrayer. An idea desperate and risky began to form. Amelia remembered Liam mentioning months ago how his father had insisted on linking all their family devices to a central iCloud account for security and convenience. It was a typically controlling move from Richard Sterling. Most of the family ignored it, but Liam, ever the dutiful son, had complied. The family's shared iPad, a device mainly used by guests to browse the internet or check the weather, was kept in the estate's grand 2-story library. If Liam's photo stream was synced, it was a long shot. He was usually so careful, so meticulously private. But the text message had been a slip-up. Maybe there were others. Just after 2 a.m., when the house was draped in a profound silence, Amelia slipped out of bed. Barefoot and clad in a silk robe, she moved through the darkened corridors of the mansion like a ghost, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The library was vast and imposing, the walls lined with thousands of books that seemed to watch her with ancient leather-bound eyes. The iPad was right where it was supposed to be, on a small table by the fireplace. Her fingers trembled as she swiped the screen to life. She navigated to the Photos app, her breath held tight in her chest. The main library was innocuous pictures from family vacations, charity galas, photos of the estate. It was a curated collection of the Sterling family's public perfection. Disappointment began to set in. Of course he would be too smart for this. Then she saw it. Tucked away at the bottom of the albums list, a folder that most people forget exists, recently deleted. Her blood turned to ice. With a shaking thumb, she tapped it open, and her world ended. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't some anonymous woman from his office. The woman in the photos laughing intimately with Liam was Chloe, her best friend, her maid of honor, the person she loved and trusted like a sister. The first photo was a selfie taken in what looked like a Parisian hotel room. Chloe was wearing a slinky black dress, her head resting on Liam's shoulder. And there, glittering against her skin, was the Serafina pendant. Her smile was triumphant, possessive. Liam was looking at her with an unguarded adoration Amelia hadn't seen in years. Amelia's stomach lurched violently. She scrolled down her thumb, moving with a morbid, unstoppable momentum. Each new image was a fresh blade twisting in her gut. There were dozens. Pictures of them holding hands while strolling along the Seine, taken during a trip Chloe claimed was a solo eat, pray, love adventure. Photos of them kissing in a cozy cafe, a trip Liam had dismissed as a boring business conference in Brussels. The betrayal was so profound, so absolute, it was almost surreal. It wasn't a recent fling. The dates on the photos stretched back over a year. Their entire relationship. Their friendship had been a lie. As if the visual evidence wasn't enough, she found that his iMessages were synced as well. She opened the thread with the same unknown number from the text preview. It was Chloe, of course, saved under a code name. She scrolled up, reading their history, the words blurring through her tears. Chloe. Is she getting suspicious at all? Liam. Not a clue. She's too blinded by the fairy tale. It's almost sad. Chloe. Just a little longer. Once you're married and the baby is here, Richard will sign over the new development fund. Then you can start the process of easing her out. Liam. The baby is a complication, but a useful one. It makes me look like a stable family man. Just have to manage the inconvenience for a while. Chloe. And I'll be right there by her side helping my poor, overwhelmed best friend. It's perfect. The calculated cruelty, the sheer venom behind the words, stole Amelia's breath. They weren't just cheating. They were running a long con. They were using her love, and their unborn child as pawns in a sick game to secure Liam's inheritance. Her pregnancy wasn't a joy to them. It was a useful complication, an inconvenience to manage. A guttural sob escaped her lips, raw and wounded. She quickly stifled it, pressing a hand to her mouth. She couldn't break down. Not here. Not now. A cold, diamond-hard rage began to replace the shattering grief. They thought she was a fool. They thought she was a pawn. They had underestimated her. With a newfound, chilling clarity, Amelia began to work. She methodically airdropped every single photo, every incriminating screenshot of their text messages to her own phone and a secure cloud account. She created a hidden folder, a digital arsenal of their deceit. Then she triple-checked that the files were transferred before permanently deleting every last trace from the iPad's recently deleted folder and clearing its cache. She covered her tracks perfectly. She placed the iPad back on the table exactly as she had found it. She stood in the center of the silent library, surrounded by the immense wealth and power of the Sterling family. A world she had almost become a part of a world built on a foundation of lies. The tears had stopped. Her heartbreak had crystallized into something else, something cold and sharp and dangerous. It was resolve. They had planned to destroy her life quietly, to ease her out. Once she had served her purpose, but Amelia would not be eased out. She would not go quietly. They wanted a show. She would give them one they would never forget. The morning of her wedding day dawned bright and clear, a picture-perfect sky that felt like a personal insult. Amelia had not slept. She had sat in an armchair by the window, watching the stars fade the evidence of Liam and Chloe's betrayal burning on her phone screen, searing itself into her memory. The shock had receded, leaving behind a strange and terrifying calm. She was no longer a victim drowning in grief. She was an architect designing a demolition. The bridal suite was a flurry of activity. Hairstylists, makeup artists, and bridesmaids buzzed around their cheerful chatter, a grating noise against Amelia's silent fury. Her mother Eleanor fussed over her, her eyes misty with love and pride. Then Chloe arrived. She burst into the room, holding a tray of mimosas, her face a perfect mask of joyful excitement. "For the beautiful bride," she chirped, her eyes sparkling. "Are you nervous? You look a little pale." Amelia met her gaze in the mirror. She saw the lie reflected there, clear as day. The fake concern, the practiced smile. The woman who had held her hand through every crisis was the crisis. Amelia felt a surge of nausea so intense she had to grip the edge of the vanity. "Just pre-wedding jitters," Amelia replied, her voice steady, a marvel of self-control. She even managed a small, tight smile. Nothing a mimosa won't fix. Watching Chloe interact with the other bridesmaids, laughing and sharing stories about their long friendship, was a masterclass in deception. She saw the subtle ways Chloe would guide conversations away from Liam, the quick glances she'd shoot Amelia to feign solidarity. Every gesture, once a symbol of their bond, was now evidence of her treachery. Later, as she was zipped into her custom Vera Wang gown, an ethereal creation of silk and lace, she felt a profound sense of detachment, as if she were watching an actress prepare for a role. This dress wasn't for a marriage. It was a costume for the final act of a tragedy. Her father came to walk her to the ceremony. Seeing the undisguised love in his eyes was the hardest part. He was so proud, so happy, that his daughter had found what he believed to be a great love. The guilt of what she was about to do to this beautiful, hopeful day warred with the righteous anger that fueled her. But then she thought of the texts. She's too blinded by the fairy tale. It's almost sad. The condescension, the cruelty, it solidified her resolve. This wasn't just about her broken heart anymore. It was about her child. She would not bring her baby into a world built on such a toxic foundation. She would not allow her child to be raised by a man who called them an inconvenience and a woman who saw them as a pawn. Her plan, which had formed in the dark, lonely hours of the morning, was audacious and terrifying. A simple, quiet cancellation was not enough. It would allow them to control the narrative, to paint her as an unstable, emotional woman who got cold feet. They would whisper that the pregnancy had made her irrational. No, they did not deserve the dignity of a private fallout. They had built this elaborate stage for their triumph. She was going to use it for their public execution. She would go through with it, all of it. She would walk down that aisle. She would stand at that altar across from the man who had systematically dismantled her heart. She would look into his eyes and say her vows. She would let him place a ring on her finger and become, for a few short hours, Mrs. Amelia Sterling. And then, when they were at the pinnacle of their success, when the contracts were signed by the power of their union and the Sterling legacy was seemingly secure, she would take the microphone. In her bridal clutch, alongside a tube of lipstick and a lace handkerchief, was a small USB drive. On it was a file containing every photo, every screenshot, every piece of their sordid affair. She had already spoken to her tech-savvy cousin Mark, who was managing the slideshow for the reception, giving him a vague story about a special video surprise for Liam. He'd promised to have it ready to play at her signal. As she took her father's arm, the string quartet began to play. The heavy oak doors at the back of the ceremony garden swung open, revealing the sea of expectant faces. Her gaze swept over them. Friends, family, all here to witness a lie. Her eyes found Richard and Catherine Sterling in the front row, their expressions smug and satisfied. And then she saw Liam standing at the altar, a perfect, handsome groom, waiting for his sacrificial bride. Amelia took a deep breath, smoothed down her gown, and began her long walk down the aisle. Her heart wasn't beating with nervous love. It was beating like a war drum. The walk down the aisle was the longest 100 yards of Amelia's life. With every step on the rose-petal-strewn path, she felt the weight of hundreds of eyes upon her. They saw a radiant, blushing bride, a woman on the precipice of her happily ever after. They didn't see the steel in her spine or the storm gathering behind her serene smile. Her father squeezed her arm gently. "I'm so proud of the woman you've become, Amelia," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "He's a lucky man." "Thank you, Dad," she whispered back, the words catching in her throat. The sincerity of his love was a sharp pain amidst her cold resolve. As she drew closer, she focused on the scene at the altar. It was a tableau of her betrayal. There was Liam, looking impossibly handsome in his Tom Ford tuxedo. When their eyes met, he gave her a look of such breathtaking adoration that it would have once made her knees weak. Now it only fueled the fire in her veins. He was a phenomenal actor, She had to give him that. As she reached him, he even managed to produce a single perfect tear that trickled down his cheek. And beside him, as her maid of honor, stood Chloe. Dressed in a flowing blush gown, she looked ethereal, the picture of devoted friendship. She met Amelia's gaze and gave her a small, encouraging nod, a final secret twist of the knife. The sheer audacity was stunning. Her father placed her hand in Liam's. His touch was warm and firm, but to Amelia it felt like the cold clasp of a shackle. The officiant began to speak his words about love, honor, and eternal commitment washing over her, each one a bitter irony. She was hyper-aware of everything: the scent of salt from the nearby ocean, the rustle of the sea breeze through the floral arch, the way Liam's thumb stroked the back of her hand in a gesture that was meant to be comforting but felt reptilian. Then came the vows. Liam went first. He had written his own, and they were a masterpiece of poetic deception. "Amelia," he began, his voice ringing with practiced sincerity. "From the moment I first saw you in that crowded lecture hall, I knew my life was about to change. You are my compass, my anchor, and my greatest adventure. You challenge me. You inspire me. And with you I have found a home I never knew I was searching for. I promise to be your faithful partner, your confidant, and your fiercest protector. I promise to love you and our child with every fiber of my being today, and for all of my days." A collective sigh swept through the guests. Her own mother was dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Amelia watched him, her expression unreadable. He delivered the lines flawlessly, never breaking eye contact. It was the performance of a lifetime. Then it was her turn. All eyes were on her. Liam's face was a mask of loving expectation. She took a breath, the words she'd rehearsed in her mind heady on her tongue. "Liam," she said, her voice clear and steady, surprising even herself. "I once thought that the strongest structures were built of steel and stone. But you taught me that the truest foundations are built on trust and honesty." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "I promise to honor you, to care for you, and to always, always value the truth above all else. I promise to give you exactly what you deserve." It was just ambiguous enough to pass as a traditional vow, but she saw a flicker of confusion in his eyes before he masked it with another smile. The officiant prompted them for the rings. The "I do's" were exchanged. "I do," Liam said, his voice booming with triumph as he slid the diamond band onto her finger. For him, this was the finish line. The deal was sealed. The inheritance was secure. "I do," Amelia said, her voice chillingly calm. For her, this was the trigger being pulled. "Then by the power vested in me," the officiant declared, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." The crowd burst into applause. Liam leaned in his handsome face, beaming, and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was passionless, a mere formality. It tasted of ashes and lies. As he pulled away, he whispered for her ears only, "We did it, Mrs. Sterling." A cold smile touched Amelia's lips. "Yes," she whispered back. "We certainly did." As they turned to face their cheering guests and walk back down the aisle, as husband and wife, Amelia felt no joy, no love, no hope. She felt only the electrifying, terrifying thrill of imminent detonation. The trap was set. Now all she had to do was wait for the perfect moment to spring it. The reception was a breathtaking spectacle of sterling wealth held in a grand ballroom with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the darkening Atlantic. A jazz band played softly, crystal glasses clinked, and the air hummed with the cheerful din of celebration. To the 500 esteemed guests, it was the social event of the year. To Amelia, it was a courtroom, and she was about to present her closing argument. She sat at the head table, a vision of bridal perfection, nodding and smiling as people came to offer their congratulations. She played the part of the happy newlywed, flawlessly, even as she watched Liam and Chloe from the corner of her eye. They were careful, but she could see it now. The shared, fleeting glances of victory, the subtle brush of his hand against her back as Chloe leaned in to congratulate him. They were drunk on their success, utterly convinced of their own brilliance. The clinking of a knife against a champagne flute signaled the start of the speeches. Liam's best man, Ethan, a genuinely good person who Amelia knew was completely oblivious, gave a warm, funny speech about their college antics. Then it was Chloe's turn. She stood, looking angelic and demure, and delivered a speech that was a sickening masterpiece of fabricated sentimentality. She spoke of their unbreakable bond, of friendship, of watching Amelia blossom with Liam. To see two of my favorite people in the world find this kind of perfect love. Chloe concluded, her voice thick with fake tears. Is the greatest gift I could ever ask for. I love you both. Amelia wanted to vomit. She applauded along with everyone else, her nails digging into her palms. Liam's speech was next, full of thanks for their guests and effusive praise for his stunning, brilliant wife. He was at the height of his power, brimming with confidence, the beloved heir who had finally done right by the family name. And then it was her turn. The MC announced her name, and a hush fell over the room. Amelia stood gracefully, picking up her champagne flute, filled with sparkling water. She commanded the room's attention, her smile serene, her posture radiating a calm that felt almost predatory. Liam looked at her with a proud, possessive gaze. I want to thank you all so much for coming today to share in this incredibly momentous occasion. She began, her voice smooth as silk. Looking out at all of your faces, seeing so much love in one room, I am simply overwhelmed with emotion. She thanked her parents for their endless love and support. She turned to Richard and Catherine Sterling. And to my new parents, Richard and Catherine, thank you for welcoming me so warmly into your esteemed family. I promise to uphold the Sterling name with the honor and integrity it deserves. Richard nodded, a rare, genuine smile of approval on his face. And finally, she said, turning her body to face her new husband, I want to thank my husband, Liam. She paused, letting his name hang in the air for a beat too long. He has taught me so much. He taught me that love can be found in the most unexpected places. And he also taught me that the truth, no matter how deeply it's buried, always finds its way to the surface. The atmosphere in the room shifted subtly. A few confused frowns appeared. Liam's smile tightened at the edges. Most brides receive a special gift from their groom on their wedding day. Amelia continued, her voice losing its sweetness, replaced by a sharp, clear edge. And in a way I did too. You see, I recently discovered a gift Liam bought a couple of weeks ago, a stunningly beautiful necklace from Leclerc Fine Jewels. It's called the Serafina Pendant. She let that sink in. But he didn't give it to me. Her eyes locked onto Chloe, whose face had begun to drain of all color. He gave it to my maid of honor. A collective gasp swept through the ballroom. Whispers erupted like wildfire. Liam shot to his feet. Amelia, what are you doing? Sit down. You're emotional. You're not well. Oh, I'm perfectly well, Liam, she said, her voice like ice cutting through the rising chaos. In fact, I've never seen things more clearly. She raised her hand and pointed to the large projection screen behind the head table, which had been displaying a romantic slideshow of the couple. Mark, she called out to her cousin at the tech booth, her voice ringing with authority. "Could you please play the file I gave you, the one labeled The Real Fairy Tale?" Mark, looking confused but obedient, hit a key. The slideshow of smiling engagement photos vanished. In its place, a single high-resolution image filled the 10-foot screen for all 500 guests to see Liam and Chloe locked in a passionate kiss on a balcony in Paris, the Serafina pendant glittering at Chloe's throat. The room erupted. Shouts of shock and disbelief echoed off the walls. Catherine Sterling let out a small shriek. Chloe looked as if she'd been turned to stone, her face a mask of pure horror. Liam lunged for the microphone. "Turn it off. Turn that off now." But the images kept coming. A new photo flashed on the screen, a screenshot of a text message blown up to an undeniable size. Liam. "The baby is a complication, but a useful one. Just have to manage the inconvenience for a while." The next slide. Chloe. "And I'll be right there by her side, helping my poor, overwhelmed best friend. It's perfect." Picture after picture, text after text, the sordid, calculated truth of their affair was laid bare for the entire New York high society to witness. Amelia's voice, amplified by the microphone, sliced through the pandemonium. "I believe the vows included the phrase, 'to be faithful.' It seems my husband and my maid of honor had a slightly different interpretation of the word." She raised her glass of water high. "So I'd like to propose one final toast tonight." She looked from Liam's apoplectic face to Chloe's crumbling facade. "To Liam and Chloe. May they have the life they've been so carefully planning behind my back." Then she turned her gaze directly to a stunned and hen-faced Richard Sterling. "And Richard, a special piece of good news for you. When your lawyers drafted up my prenuptial agreement, you included a very, very strict infidelity clause. I insisted on a few tweaks, if you recall. By marrying your son today, I've ensured that clause is legally binding and effective immediately. This entire wedding," she made a grand, sweeping gesture around the opulent room, "every flower, every guest's meal, every bottle of this vintage champagne, it's all on him, and my divorce settlement as stipulated for his flagrant premeditated infidelity will be 2. She placed the microphone carefully back on the stand, the feedback screeching for a moment. "Congratulations to the happy couple," she said, her voice dripping with scorn. "You're free to have each other, and the bill." Without a single glance back, Amelia Davenport. Sterling turned her head held high and walked out of the ballroom, leaving the smoking crater of her old life and the architects of her betrayal to be consumed by the flames. Amelia didn't run. She walked each step deliberate and firm through the chaos she had unleashed. The sound of shouting of a glass, shattering of Catherine Sterling, wailing, it was all just noise behind her. As she reached the grand lobby, her parents and a shell-shocked Ethan Liam's best man rushed to her side. Her mother wrapped her in a fierce hug, while her father stood guard, his face a thunderous mask of protective rage. "My car is right out front," Ethan said, his voice shaking with anger on her behalf. "Let's get you out of here." The fallout was as immediate and spectacular as the speech itself. The Sterling Davenport wedding didn't just become gossip. It became a legend, a cautionary tale whispered in every country club boardroom and charity gala in New York. The story went viral, propelled by dozens of smartphone videos taken by the stunned guests. Amelia was painted not as a victim, but as a warrior. Richard Sterling, a man whose entire existence was predicated on image and control, was publicly humiliated in the most thorough way imaginable. The damage to the Sterling brand was immense. Furious at his son, not for the affair, but for the sheer idiotic recklessness of getting caught and disgracing the family name. He acted swiftly and ruthlessly. Liam was disowned. The infidelity clause in the prenup, which Amelia's lawyer had made ironclad, was enforced to the letter. Not only was Liam financially cut off from the family fortune, but he was also legally responsible for the astronomical bill of the wedding he had used as a stage for his deceit. Overnight, he went from billionaire heir to a man drowning in debt and public scorn. Chloe became a social leper. She was fired from her job at a prestigious art gallery, kicked out of her social clubs, and abandoned by friends who didn't want to be associated with the scandal. She and Liam clung to each other for a short time, their relationship built on the thrill of deception, quickly crumbling under the harsh realities of public disgrace and financial ruin. Their bond, forged in lies, could not survive the light. Amelia, meanwhile, insulated herself from the storm. She retreated to her parents' quiet home in Connecticut, surrounding herself with a small circle of true friends and family. Her first call was to her lawyer. On the grounds of fraud, the marriage was annulled so quickly, it was as if it had never happened. The following months were a quiet battle. There were days of overwhelming grief for the life she thought she had, and for the friend she had truly loved. She went to therapy to unpack the complex trauma of the betrayal. But with each passing week, she felt a layer of the old, naive Amelia slough away, revealing someone stronger and more resilient underneath. She channeled her energy into her two great passions, her baby and her career. She moved out of the Park Avenue penthouse she had once shared with Liam and found a beautiful light-filled loft in Soho. It was a blank canvas, and she poured her heart into designing it, creating a warm, safe, and beautiful home for herself and her child. She also opened her own boutique architecture firm, Davenport Designs, specializing in sustainable, family-focused urban living spaces. Her story, which had made her infamous, also made her an icon of strength, and clients flocked to her. 6 months after the wedding that wasn't Amelia gave birth to a healthy, beautiful baby girl. She named her Hope. Holding her daughter for the first time, looking into her innocent, trusting eyes, Amelia felt a profound sense of peace. The life she had lost, the life of a sterling wife, was never really hers to begin with. It was an illusion, a gilded cage. The life she was building now on her own terms was real. A year later, Amelia stood on the rooftop of her firm's latest project, a revolutionary new community center in Brooklyn. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from her lawyer with the final confirmation the last of the settlement funds from Liam had been transferred. It was a significant sum, but its true value was not in the dollars. It was in the closure it represented. She was financially secure, but more importantly, she was free. She looked out over the skyline she had once dreamed of conquering alongside a man who never loved her. Now she was reshaping it on her own. She pulled out her phone and looked at the lock screen, a picture of a smiling, giggling Hope. The fire that was meant to destroy her had only forged her. She hadn't just survived the wreckage. She had built a new, more beautiful world from the ashes. And it was all hers. 2 years had passed since the infamous Sterling Davenport wedding. 2 years since Amelia had walked out of that ballroom and into a new unwritten chapter of her life. The scandal had long since faded from the headlines, replaced by new society dramas, but its impact had forged a permanent new reality for everyone involved. For Amelia, that reality was one she had built with her own 2 hands. Davenport Designs was no longer a boutique firm. It was a celebrated name in New York architecture, renowned for its innovative and humane approach to urban spaces. Tonight she was being honored at the annual Architectural Guild Gala, receiving the prestigious Visionary of the Year award for her work on a non-profit community housing project. She stood at the podium, bathed in the warm spotlight, a picture of quiet confidence and elegance in a deep emerald gown. She looked out at the sea of admiring faces a world away from the hostile crowd she had last addressed in a ballroom like this one. A home is not just a structure of steel and glass, she said, her voice calm and resonant. It is a foundation. It is the safe space where we begin our stories. And I believe everyone, regardless of their circumstances, deserves a foundation built with dignity, integrity, and hope. Her speech was met with a thunderous standing ovation. As she returned to her table, clutching the heavy award, her phone buzzed with a message from her babysitter. A picture of her daughter Hope, a joyful 3-year-old with a paint-smeared face, fast asleep. A wide, genuine smile spread across Amelia's face. This was her victory. Not the public humiliation of her enemies, but this. The quiet joy, the meaningful work, the love for her child. Later in the evening, feeling warm from the champagne and the congratulations, she stepped out onto the terrace for a breath of cool night air. The gala was being held at a different venue, but the opulent setting, the crystal chandeliers, the clinking glasses, the distant sound of a string quartet was an unavoidable echo of the past. She decided to head home early to kiss her daughter goodnight. As she made her way to the cloakroom, she handed her ticket to an attendant, whose face was half hidden in the shadows of the dimly lit alcove. "It's a black wool coat, number 142, she said politely. The attendant stiffened. He didn't move for a moment, his head bowed. Then slowly he looked up. The face was gaunter, the eyes hollowed out and haunted the expensive charm replaced by a veneer of cheap desperation. But it was unmistakably him. Liam Sterling. He was wearing the ill-fitting standard-issue black vest of the event's catering staff. Amelia's breath caught in her throat. For a heartbeat, the floor seemed to drop out from under her. Then the shock was replaced by a profound, cold calm. He was just a man, a ghost from a life that no longer belonged to her. "Liam," she said, her voice even betraying no emotion. He flinched at the sound of his name from her lips. "Amelia," he rasped. His eyes darted around, terrified someone might see them talking. I didn't know you'd be here." "I was receiving an award," she stated simply, a fact, not a boast. He swallowed hard, his gaze falling to the floor. "I saw. Congratulations. You look good." The word sounded rusty, unused. "I need my coat, please," she said, keeping her tone professional. He fumbled for a moment before retrieving her coat from the rack. As he held it out, his hands trembled. He didn't let go. "Amelia, wait," he pleaded, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. "I need you to know. I am so sorry. For everything. I was a fool. I was arrogant. I lost everything." "You didn't lose it, Liam," Amelia replied, her voice soft but firm, devoid of the anger that had once consumed her. "You gave it away. You made choices." Tears welled in his eyes. "She left me," he said, the words spilling out in a bitter rush. "Chloe. She was gone the second my father's lawyers called. Cleaned out our joint account and ran off to Miami with some ancient real estate mogul. She never loved me. It was all about the money." Amelia felt a distant clinical pang of pity, not for him, but for the boy He might have been before the sterling name had poisoned him. "And you think your love for me was any different?" she asked, not needing an answer. "I think about you every day," he confessed, his voice breaking. "I think about what I destroyed, what we could have had. Our child, her name is Hope," Amelia cut in, her voice sharpening like a blade. "And she is my child. She is the best part of my life, a life you have absolutely no part in. You don't get to say her name." He recoiled as if struck. The truth of her words, of his complete and total irrelevance, hit him with the force of a physical blow. Amelia gently pulled her coat from his grasp and slipped it on. "I don't hate you, Liam," she said, looking at him one last time. It was the truth. Hate required energy, and he was no longer worth her energy. "To hate you, I'd have to think about you. And I don't." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving him standing in the shadows of the cloakroom, a relic of a past she had fully and finally escaped. She didn't look back. Half an hour later, she was home, tiptoeing into her daughter's room. In the soft glow of the nightlight, she watched Hope sleep, her small chest rising and falling. Peacefully, Amelia leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, inhaling the sweet scent of her child. The echoes of the ballroom were gone, replaced by the quiet, steady rhythm of a life built not on vengeance, but on love. A life built on a foundation of hope. Amelia's story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the most devastating betrayals can lead to our greatest liberation. She turned her deepest pain into her most defining moment of strength, proving that a woman's worth is never determined by a man's loyalty. Her speech wasn't just an act of revenge. It was an act of reclamation of her life, her dignity and her future for herself and her child. What did you think of her incredible moment of triumph? If this story of resilience and empowerment moved you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more unforgettable stories. Let us know in the comments below, what would you have done in Amelia's shoes?